Picture a traveler standing before a red door in a corridor with no windows. The handle is warm beneath his palm, almost alive, and every instinct in his body says not to open it. But he has already decided that this door must be his door, because he has walked too far, suffered too much, and invested too much of himself to turn around now. So he ignores the heat in the metal, the strange silence behind the frame, the way the candle flame beside him bends away from the entrance as if even fire refuses to go through. He calls the resistance fear. He calls the warning doubt. He calls the closed door a test of his determination. And then, with both hands, he forces the lock. What waits on the other side is not destiny. It is the life he was being protected from. This is what happens when you mistake obstruction for opposition and refuse to recognize that sometimes the universe does not block a path because you are weak, but because the path is wrong. There is a belief that has been handed to you so many times from so many directions that it no longer feels like a belief. It feels like a law. It feels like the most obvious truth in the world. And that belief is this: every obstacle is a test, every closed door is an invitation to push harder, and the only people who succeed are the ones who refuse to quit. You have heard this in stories of famous persistence. You have seen it framed on walls and quoted in speeches. You have used it to justify continuing long after something stopped feeling right. You have told yourself that the friction was the point, that the difficulty was the proof, that the suffering was the tuition you owed for the destination you deserved. But here is what no one told you. Not every obstacle is a test of your strength. Some obstacles are messages. Some closed doors are not challenges disguised as rejections. They are rejections that are exactly what they appear to be. And the refusal to read them correctly is not courage. It is a very specific and very costly kind of blindness. The culture of persistence has given you a single tool and told you to use it on every surface you encounter. Push, drive, grind, endure. But a hammer that breaks walls does not know the difference between a wall and a load-bearing structure. And the person who pushes through every door does not know the difference between resistance born from their own hesitation and resistance born from the universe redirecting their trajectory. Think carefully about what you have forced open in your life. Think about the relationships you held together long after the first honest signal told you the connection was finished. Think about the jobs you stayed in while your body contracted every Sunday evening. Think about the plans you refused to release because you had already told people about them, already built your identity around them, already convinced yourself that turning back would mean admitting failure. Now, ask yourself a more uncomfortable question. What if the obstacle was never the enemy? What if the friction, the silence, the strange heaviness, the doors that would not open no matter what you tried? What if all of that was the universe speaking to you in the clearest language it knows? The false belief is not that persistence matters. Persistence matters enormously on the right path. The false belief is that persistence is always the correct response to obstruction. That assumption has caused more quiet devastation than most people are willing to account for. It has led people into marriages that hollowed them, into careers that dimmed them, into cities, business decisions, and spiritual directions that cost them years they will never recover. The cost of forcing the wrong door is not just the door itself. It is everything on the other side of it. Every month you spend pushing against a sealed entrance is a month you are not walking toward an open one. Every unit of energy you pour into forcing a misaligned path is energy that cannot be used to recognize, receive, and walk through the path that was waiting for you without resistance, without dread, without that low and persistent ache that something was wrong. Obstruction has a texture, and once you learn to feel it correctly, you will never mistake it for a simple test again. There is a quality to aligned difficulty that feels effortful but alive. It feels like climbing something real, like your body knows the summit exists even when your legs are exhausted. But wrong path friction has a different feeling entirely. It feels like pushing against something that does not move, not because the lock is heavy, but because the door is sealed from the other side. That sealed quality is not incidental. It is not random. It is not the universe being indifferent. It is the universe being extraordinarily precise. The resistance you feel when you are forcing the wrong path is not neutral. It is directional. It is communicative. It is a language, and it has been speaking to you every time you called it fear, every time you called it weakness, every time you told yourself to push harder against the thing that was never meant to yield. The belief that obstacles are always tests of persistence is not wrong because persistence is wrong. It is wrong because it teaches you to override the signal without reading it first. It trains you to treat your own discomfort as something to defeat rather than something to decode. And in teaching you to override the signal, it disconnects you from the most important navigation system you were given. What you are about to enter is not a conversation about giving up. Giving up is not what this codex teaches. What this codex teaches is something more precise, more difficult, and far more powerful. It teaches you to tell the difference between a door worth forcing and a door that is red. Because the traveler in the corridor was not weak. He was not a failure. He was simply illiterate in a language the universe had been writing on the walls around him for longer than he knew. This audiobook will take you through a complete decoding of the red door signal, not as a metaphor to comfort you, but as a real, mappable, recognizable pattern that appears before collapse, before wasted years, before the kind of regret that sits in the chest like a stone you cannot name. You will learn to read this signal before it reaches that stage. In the first chamber of this codex, you will discover the hidden metaphysical law that governs obstruction. You will understand why aligned paths still require effort, but why wrong paths produce a specific, exhausting, draining kind of friction that does not resolve no matter how hard you push. This distinction alone will change the way you interpret difficulty for the rest of your life. In the second chamber, you will learn why most people cannot read this signal even when it is appearing clearly. You will see how ego, sunk cost, public expectation, and the fear of looking like a person who quit all conspire to make the red door invisible. You will recognize yourself in this section, and that recognition will not be comfortable, but it will be necessary. In the third chamber, you will walk through real examples, relationships that ended in collapse because the warnings were overridden, career paths that drained their travelers dry, creative projects and spiritual directions that were pursued past the point of alignment and into the territory of quiet devastation. Each example will show you exactly where the red door signal appeared and exactly what it looked like before the door was forced open. After the examples, this codex turns into a diagnostic mirror. You will be shown the specific ways this pattern appears in daily life. The repeated delays, the body signals, the strange silences, the logistical breakdowns that seem unrelated but are not. You will learn what the pattern reveals about your inner state, your attachment structures, your relationship to identity, and your fear of the empty corridor between one door and the next. Then, this codex will teach you to separate the real signal from its counterfeits. Not every obstacle is a red door. Some difficulty is correct difficulty. Some resistance is the friction of growth, not the wall of misalignment. You will learn the precise difference, and you will carry that discernment as one of the most valuable tools you have ever been given. The fourth chamber contains the protocol itself. The Red Door Protocol is a step-by-step method for pausing when friction appears, identifying whether the obstruction is correction or challenge, checking the body as a primary instrument, confirming the signal, and redirecting your energy toward the paths that open without force. It is not a method of passivity. It is a method of intelligent navigation. You will also learn the most common mistakes people make when they first encounter this teaching. Some use it to justify avoidance. Some treat a single inconvenience as a cosmic verdict. Some force a new door the moment the red one closes, carrying the same misaligned energy into a different corridor. This codex will name those mistakes clearly so you do not repeat them. The final chamber will return you to the traveler and the red door. But by the time you reach that corridor again, you will be able to see what he could not. You will understand that the real path was never behind the door he was trying to force. It was waiting in the silence he was refusing to enter. And you will leave this library knowing how to enter that silence without fear. If this language feels familiar, if the idea that reality speaks to you in patterns and signals, and the texture of obstruction resonates somewhere beneath conscious thought, then subscribe to the Third Library. There are more codices waiting to be opened, and each one is a door that was always meant to find you. There is a law operating beneath every experience of obstruction. It does not have a name in most traditions. It is rarely spoken about directly, even in metaphysical circles, because it requires a level of nuance that most teachings bypass in favor of simpler instructions. But the law is real. It is consistent, and once you understand it, you will never read resistance the same way again. The law is this: reality is not neutral. It is responsive. It is a system that communicates through the quality, texture, and persistence of what it returns to you when you move in a particular direction. When you move toward something aligned, even when the path is difficult, there is a quality of forward momentum beneath the difficulty. When you move toward something misaligned, even when you are working very hard, the system returns a specific kind of sealed, circular, draining obstruction that does not resolve. This is not a poetic interpretation of coincidence. It is a structural feature of how consciousness and reality interact. Your inner state, your assumptions, your frequency, your deepest beliefs about who you are and what you deserve and what is possible for you, these are not separate from the events of your life. They are the lens through which reality is being generated and returned to you. When something is deeply misaligned at that level, the obstruction you encounter is the system trying to communicate that misalignment. Think of it this way. Imagine you are operating a machine that requires a specific input to produce a specific output. If you insert the correct input, the machine runs. It may run with effort. There may be heat, noise, and resistance as the gears turn. But it runs. If you insert an incorrect input, the machine does not simply run poorly. It stops, it jams, it produces feedback. The feedback is not the machine punishing you. The feedback is the machine communicating incompatibility. You are that machine. and the paths you pursue are the inputs. When the path is wrong, the system generates incompatibility feedback. That feedback is what you are experiencing when you encounter the dead, draining, sealed quality of forced path friction. The universe is not blocking you because it is indifferent to your efforts. It is blocking you because the input does not match the output that is waiting for you. Now, here is the part of the law that most teachings miss entirely. Aligned paths are not frictionless. This is critical. If you walk away from this codex believing that aligned paths are always easy, you will misread every genuine challenge as a red door signal, and you will stop before you should. Aligned paths have their own difficulty. They have moments of exhaustion, uncertainty, and doubt. They require patience and sustained effort. But the difficulty on an aligned path has a specific quality. It has a quality of aliveness. Even when you are tired, there is something underneath the tiredness that knows the path is real. There is a pulse beneath the struggle. You encounter obstacles, but they tend to resolve. They open. They shift when you apply the right pressure. They generate new information that moves you forward rather than returning you to the same sealed wall. Wrong path friction has a different signature entirely. Wrong path friction is circular. You encounter an obstacle, you work to resolve it, and then the same obstacle or a variation of it appears again in a different form. You feel like you are pushing against a surface that does not change regardless of how much effort you apply. The exhaustion is not the exhaustion of rightful climbing. It is the exhaustion of a system telling you that you are in the wrong corridor and have been for longer than you realized. There is also an emotional quality to wrong path obstruction that is distinct and recognizable once you know what to feel for. It is a heaviness that is not simple discouragement. Discouragement has energy in it. Discouragement still contains the desire to continue, even if the desire is frustrated. Wrong path heaviness is different. It is a flatness, a kind of quiet dread that wraps around the goal itself, not around the difficulty of achieving it, but around the idea of achieving it. This is one of the most important signals in the entire codex. Pay close attention to it. When you imagine achieving what you are pursuing, and the image produces not expansion, but something closer to quiet dread or emptiness, that is not fear of success. That is your deeper intelligence communicating that the destination does not belong to you. The goal was constructed from external expectation, social pressure, ego comparison, or an old version of yourself that has already been outgrown. The law of obstruction, as protection, operates through multiple channels simultaneously. It works through logistics. Documents get lost, dates misalign, resources dry up at inexplicable moments. It works through relationships. The people required to move a wrong path forward begin to withdraw, become unavailable, or introduce complications that stall every attempt at progress. It works through the body. Sleep becomes unreliable. The immune system speaks. Chronic fatigue, persistent tension, and the feeling of carrying something heavier than the task itself. None of these are random. They are a coordinated response from a system that is trying to redirect you. The word coordinated may sound extreme, but consider this. When three separate channels are all communicating the same message at the same time, the likelihood that they are unrelated is much smaller than the likelihood that they are pointing to the same truth. The law is not punitive. This deserves to be said clearly and directly. The universe is not punishing you for choosing the wrong door. There is no punishment in this system. There is only feedback. And the more persistent the feedback, the more the system is trying to correct your trajectory before the cost of the wrong path becomes irreversible. Some people receive the feedback early. A single logistical failure, one strange conversation, one morning where the body refuses to mobilize, and something inside them quietly says, "This is not the right direction." These people have developed a sensitivity to the signal that most people have not yet cultivated. They read the early whisper and they turn before they reach the red door. Other people do not receive the signal at that subtle level, not because the signal was absent, but because they were not yet literate in the language. And so the signal escalates. It becomes louder, more persistent, more expensive. The universe speaks in whispers first, then in patterns, then in walls, then in collapses. The collapse is not cruelty. It is the loudest possible version of a message that was always trying to reach you. The law also operates according to a principle of proportionality. The more energy you pour into a wrong path, the more dramatically the obstruction grows. This is not the universe punishing your effort. It is a system responding to amplified input with amplified feedback. When you push harder against a sealed door, the door does not weaken. It pushes back with equivalent force. This is why people who force wrong paths for years often experience sudden and total collapses rather than gradual corrections. The collapse is proportional to the sustained override of the signal. There is a deeper layer of this law that connects it to identity rather than just external circumstances. When you pursue a path that is misaligned with who you actually are at the level of genuine being rather than constructed self-image, the friction is not just external. It is internal. You begin to lose contact with your own intuition. You become increasingly rigid, defensive, and reactive because some part of you knows the path is wrong and is working overtime to silence that knowledge. The internal cost of forcing a wrong path is not just energy. It is coherence. Coherence is the felt sense of being aligned with yourself. When you are on a wrong path for long enough, coherence breaks down. You begin to feel fragmented. You cannot hear your own inner signals clearly because there is so much internal noise generated by the work of overriding them. This is when people say they feel lost, confused, disconnected, or like they have forgotten who they are. They have not forgotten. They have simply been ignoring the messenger for so long that the messenger has stopped speaking at full volume. The law of obstruction as protection is also connected to timing. Reality operates within a system of timing that is not always visible to the conscious mind. What appears to be a blocked path may sometimes be a path that is not yet ready rather than a path that is wrong. This distinction matters enormously, and the codex will address it in detail when it teaches you to distinguish genuine red door signals from maturating ones. For now, understand that the law has a temporal dimension. Some doors are sealed because they lead somewhere wrong, and some doors are temporarily closed because the corridor on the other side is still being built. The practice of reading obstruction correctly begins with the capacity to be still inside the friction rather than immediately reacting to it. Most people's first response to a closed door is to push. The second response is to push harder. The third response is to find a different tool and push with that. The entire sequence skips the most important step entirely, which is to pause, feel the quality of the obstruction, and ask what is being communicated before deciding what to do. That pause is not passivity. That pause is the most active thing you can do in the presence of obstruction. It is the act of becoming fluent in the language the universe is using to speak to you. Without that pause, you are operating on reflex. With it, you are operating with discernment. And discernment is the difference between a traveler who reads the map and a traveler who walks until they collapse. The law beneath every obstruction is that reality is a guidance system. It is not a neutral terrain through which you push until something gives. It is an intelligent feedback environment that is constantly calibrating your direction based on the coherence between your inner state and the paths you pursue. When the coherence is present, reality responds with resonance. When the coherence is absent, reality responds with friction, delay, heaviness, and ultimately with the unmistakable heat of a door handle that every part of you already knows not to open. You have felt that heat before. You recognized it even when you chose to call it something else. That recognition is not nothing. It is the beginning of a literacy that this codex will now build into something precise, usable, and permanent. The law does not require your belief to operate. It has been operating throughout your entire life, including during the times when you forced a door open and paid the price for what was behind it. What changes when you understand the law is not the law itself. What changes is your relationship to the feedback. You stop fighting the signal and start reading it. And the moment you start reading it, you stop being a person to whom things happen and start being a person who navigates. If the signal is this consistent, this recognizable, and this proportional, then why do most people miss it? Why do they stand before a red door with every internal instrument registering alarm and still choose to force the lock? The answer is not ignorance. The answer is architecture. The human mind has structures built specifically to override the signal, and those structures are extraordinarily powerful. The first structure is ego identity. When you have decided that a particular path is your path, that decision becomes part of who you believe you are. The career is not just a career. It is the proof that you are capable, ambitious, and worthy. The relationship is not just a relationship. It is the evidence that you are lovable, chosen, and complete. The business plan is not just a business plan. It is the validation of your intelligence, your vision, and your right to take up space. When the path is threatened, it is not just the path that feels threatened. It is you. This is why the red door signal is so often reframed as a personal attack rather than a navigational message. When you are deeply identified with a goal, the obstacle feels like an attack on your identity. And when something feels like an attack, the natural response is to defend, to dig in, to push harder. Not because pushing harder is rational, but because retreating feels like surrendering the self. The second structure is sunk cost. You've already spent something: time, money, emotion, social capital, public declaration, or years of your life. The more you have spent, the more psychologically impossible it becomes to consider that the investment may not lead where you intended. The mind creates a story. I cannot stop now because everything I have given will have been wasted. But this logic is a trap because the sunk cost does not change the quality of the path ahead. What has been spent is spent. The question is never whether you have invested enough to deserve the destination. The question is whether the destination is real. The third structure is public expectation. You told people about the plan. You posted about it. You made announcements. Other people are watching. And the fear of being seen as someone who started and stopped, who dreamed and then retreated, who promised and then pivoted, that fear is often more powerful than the signal from reality itself. Social humiliation is one of the oldest and deepest human fears, and so people continue on wrong paths long past the point of honest alignment simply to avoid the discomfort of public revision. The fourth structure is the cultural programming around persistence. You were given this program from childhood. The stories you were told had a consistent message. The hero pushes through. The hero does not quit. The hero ignores the doubt, overrides the fear, and eventually breaks through to the other side. This program is not entirely wrong. There are paths where persistence is the answer. But the program has no discernment built into it. It applies the same instruction to every obstacle without asking whether this particular obstacle is a test or a transmission. The fifth structure is the conflation of discomfort with misalignment. Not all discomfort is a red door signal. Some discomfort is the correct sensation of growth, of stretching beyond familiar territory, of doing something real for the first time. The person who has never separated these two experiences reads every discomfort as a potential signal to stop, and every signal to stop as weakness to overcome. They are operating with a broken instrument, and they do not know it because no one ever taught them to calibrate it. There is also a more subtle distortion at work, one that is specifically relevant to people on spiritual paths. This distortion is the spiritualization of persistence. It sounds like this: I know the universe is testing my faith. I know this is a dark night before the breakthrough. I know I just have to hold on and trust the process. These phrases are not always wrong, but in the presence of a genuine red door signal, they become a way of wrapping the forced path in spiritual language so it feels sacred rather than stubborn. The spiritualization of persistence is particularly seductive because it recruits your deepest values to serve your resistance to the signal. It turns your spiritual practice into a justification for override, and because it sounds humble and faithful, it is almost impossible to question from the inside. You would need to step outside the story for a moment, feel the body, and ask honestly whether the trust you are describing is genuine surrender or whether it is simply a more sophisticated version of force. Fear of the empty corridor is another enormous factor. When a door closes or is recognized as wrong, the question becomes immediately and uncomfortably, then what? The person does not yet know what comes next. The corridor between the closed door and the next open one is empty, unfamiliar, and quiet. And that quiet feels terrifying to a mind that has organized its entire identity around the pursuit of a specific destination. The empty corridor is not failure, but it feels like failure. It feels like loss of direction, loss of self, loss of meaning. And rather than sit in that corridor long enough to let the next door become visible, most people turn around and go back to the red one, pushing harder, finding new angles, refusing to accept that the corridor itself is part of the path and that the emptiness is where the signal recalibrates. There is also a temporal distortion that makes misreading the signal nearly inevitable for most people. The wrong path often feels good in the beginning. This is important. The early stages of a misaligned pursuit can feel energizing, exciting, and full of possibility. This is because the novelty and the momentum of beginning something new generate their own energy, regardless of whether the path is correct. It is only over time, as the path fails to deliver on its deepest implicit promises, that the quality of the friction begins to change. By the time the wrong path friction becomes undeniable, the person has usually invested so much that all the other structures, identity, sunk cost, public expectation, cultural programming, are now fully activated. The signal is at its loudest precisely when the psychological cost of hearing it is at its highest. This is not a flaw in the system. It is simply the reality of how the law of obstruction operates in conjunction with human psychology. The final and perhaps most invisible reason people misread the signal is that they have never been taught that reality speaks. They have been taught that reality is neutral, that it is a stage on which they perform, a material through which they carve outcomes through sheer force of will. The idea that reality is a responsive, communicative, intelligent feedback system is simply not part of their operating framework. And so when the signal appears, they have no category for it. They cannot read what they do not know exists as a language. That is precisely why this codex exists. Not to tell you to stop, not to tell you to quit every time something gets hard, but to teach you the language so that when you stand before the next door and feel the warmth of the handle and notice the candle bending away, you know exactly what you are reading and exactly what it is asking of you. Consider a woman who has been in a relationship for 4 years. The first 2 years were expansive, alive, full of genuine connection. But somewhere in the 3rd year, something shifted. Conversations that used to flow began to require effort. Silence between them changed its quality, moving from comfortable to something heavier, something that neither of them quite named. She noticed. Her body noticed more than her mind did. She began waking at 3 in the morning with a low and unnameable anxiety that she attributed to work, to stress, to anything other than the relationship itself. Then the logistical signals began. Their shared plans kept falling apart for reasons that seemed external. A trip that fell through 3 times. An apartment they almost moved into together but could not finalize. Conversations about the future that always somehow ended before arriving at a conclusion. She told herself these were circumstantial. She told herself that all relationships require effort and that the difficulty was normal. She pushed harder into the connection, investing more energy, more presence, more patience. The relationship lasted another year before it ended in a way that cost them both something they had not anticipated losing. And afterward, when she sat with the honest memory of those final months, she could trace the red door signal with extraordinary precision. It had begun long before the collapse. It had been consistent, repeated, and directional. She had simply not yet been taught to read it as a message rather than a challenge to overcome. This pattern is not unique to her. It appears in nearly every relationship that ends in exhaustion rather than evolution. There is always a point, often identifiable in retrospect, where the signal began, not as a verdict but as a question. And the question was not answered because neither person had the language to hear it. Now, consider a man who had built a career in a field he entered because it was practical, because it was expected, because it made sense on paper. He was competent. He was not terrible at the work, but every morning contained a specific quality of resistance that he could not name. Not laziness, not fear of the work itself. Something more fundamental, something that felt like the body's quiet refusal to believe that this was the right direction. He tried to override it with habits, with morning routines, with books about productivity and purpose. He attended professional development trainings. He sought promotions. He convinced himself that passion would arrive when competence deepened enough, but the resistance did not change. If anything, it grew more specific over time, concentrating in his chest every Sunday evening with a precision that was almost clinical. The logistical signals appeared around year 6. Projects that should have advanced his career began to stall inexplicably. Decisions that others in his field seemed to navigate easily became unusually complicated for him specifically. A promotion he had spent 2 years preparing for was restructured away entirely 3 days before the announcement. He experienced this as extraordinary bad luck. He doubled his effort. He worked longer hours. He pushed. What followed was not the breakthrough the culture of persistence had promised him. What followed was burnout of a depth that required an extended absence from the field to recover from. And during that absence, in the silence he had been avoiding for years, he discovered the work he was actually meant to do. The collapse was not punishment. The collapse was the door finally refusing to open, and the corridor on the other side finally becoming quiet enough for him to hear what had been waiting. Consider a person who moves to a city because the idea of that city feels like the answer to something they cannot yet articulate. The first months carry the energy of beginning, of novelty, of possibility. But very quickly, the practical architecture of life in that city begins to resist them in ways that feel disproportionate. Finding housing becomes an ordeal that produces failure after failure despite genuine effort. Community does not form in the ways it does for others around them. The small daily frictions of the city, the commute, the cost, the social texture, these are not the frictions of adjustment. They feel more like a persistent incompatibility, as though the city itself is communicating that this arrangement is not correct. They stay longer than the signal suggests they should, because they have already moved everything they own, and because the idea of admitting the move was a mistake is more frightening than the difficulty of remaining. When they finally leave, often catalyzed by a collapse or a loss that forced the decision, they report an almost immediate sense of returning to themselves. Not because the new place is perfect, but because the specific quality of sealed circular obstruction simply disappears. The friction of life in the right place is not absent, but it has a different texture. It is the friction of building, rather than the friction of misalignment. Now, consider a business plan. Someone has an idea that feels genuine. They invest the first stages of development, and the early momentum is real. But at a certain point in the process, a specific pattern of obstruction begins. The partnerships that should finalize do not. The funding conversations that seemed on the verge of commitment repeatedly dissolve at the last moment. The team they were building begins to fragment. They interpret each of these individually as a specific problem with a specific solution. They work to solve each one, but as they solve one, another appears in its place. The pattern is circular, draining and sealed. They pour more capital into it. They pivot the model. They rebrand. The pivots do not resolve the obstruction. They produce new variants of the same fundamental incompatibility between the plan and the path reality is trying to offer them. The ones who eventually release the business plan before it completely bankrupts them report the same experience, that in the space of releasing it, something else became visible. Not immediately, not comfortably, but in the corridor of silence after the door stopped being forced, the actual direction began to reveal itself with a clarity that the noise of forcing had been masking entirely. Creative projects carry their own version of this pattern. Consider someone working on a manuscript, a film project, a collection, or a body of work that they have been developing for years. There is a difference between a project that is difficult because it is genuinely demanding and a project that is difficult because something about its fundamental direction has drifted out of alignment with the creator's actual voice and vision. When a creative project is on a wrong path, it does not simply become hard, it becomes strangely silent. The ideas that used to arrive begin to withdraw. The enthusiasm that once made the work feel alive becomes increasingly difficult to access. Forcing the work produces output that the creator knows in some private, honest chamber of themselves does not carry the same quality as what came before the drift. Some creators push through this silence by sheer discipline, convincing themselves that creative dryness is the price of serious work. And sometimes they are right. But sometimes the silence is the project trying to tell the creator that a specific direction was wrong and that the genuine work lies somewhere adjacent to where they have been forcing it. The ones who learn to sit in that silence long enough to hear the distinction between dry resistance and sealed misalignment become markedly different in their relationship to creative work. Spiritual decisions carry perhaps the most subtle and consequential version of the red door pattern. Consider someone who attaches themselves to a particular teacher, community, or practice because the initial resonance was genuine. Something real was there in the beginning, a frequency that matched something they were seeking. But over time, the resonance changes. The practice begins to produce contraction rather than expansion. The community begins to feel more like a system of compliance than a field of genuine inquiry. The red door signal in spiritual contexts is particularly difficult to read because the language of spiritual commitment often frames the discomfort of leaving as a spiritual failing. Persistence is spiritualized, doubt is pathologized, the body's signals are overridden in the name of devotion, and the result is that people remain in spiritual alignments that have run their course, that have become genuinely misaligned, not because the original experience was false, but because the path has shifted and they have not yet given themselves permission to shift with it. Each of these examples carries the same structural signature. There is an original, authentic impulse. The early stages carried genuine energy. At a specific point, the quality of the friction changed from the alive difficulty of rightful challenge to the sealed, circular, draining obstruction of misalignment. The signal appeared consistently across multiple channels, and the forcing continued because the structures of ego, sunk cost, and cultural programming conspired to make reading the signal feel impossible. This is the pattern beneath the pattern. Not just what happens when you force the wrong door, but why. And why has a shape you can now begin to recognize in your own experience. The red door pattern does not announce itself with a single dramatic event. It reveals itself through accumulation, through repetition, through the way that a specific texture of obstruction begins to appear across multiple areas of life simultaneously, as though different surfaces of the same wall are all displaying the same message in slightly different languages. The first way the pattern appears is through repeated delays in the same specific area, not random delays distributed evenly across your life, but delays that are concentrated around one particular goal, one particular relationship, one particular direction. If you are trying to move something forward and the same category of obstacle reappears 3 or more times in different forms, the repetition itself is the signal. Reality does not stutter. When something repeats, it is returning for a reason. The second way the pattern appears is through what can be called logistical impossibility. This is when tasks that should be straightforward become inexplicably complicated. Documents that should take a day to finalize take weeks. Appointments that should come together easily produce one scheduling conflict after another. Resources that are available to others in the same situation become unavailable specifically when you reach for them. This is not bad luck operating in a vacuum. It is a system producing friction along a very specific vector. The third way the pattern appears is through body contraction. The body is one of the most reliable instruments you have been given, and it responds to misalignment before the conscious mind can articulate what is wrong. Pay attention to what happens in your physical body when you think about continuing on the path. If the primary sensation is contraction, a tightening in the chest, a heaviness in the stomach, a subtle withdrawal of energy that happens involuntarily, that contraction is not anxiety about success. It is the body registering incompatibility. The distinction between anxious contraction and misalignment contraction is subtle but learnable. Anxious contraction around an aligned goal usually coexists with an underlying current of aliveness. The excitement is there beneath the nervousness. Misalignment contraction is different. It is flat. There is no excitement beneath it. There is only the dread of continuing, the exhaustion of having already continued this far, and the low-frequency sense that something at the root level is wrong. The fourth way the pattern appears is through what might be called the absence of natural support. When a path is aligned, it tends to attract what it needs in ways that are often difficult to fully explain, but unmistakable in experience. The right person appears at the right moment. Information arrives through unexpected channels. Resources align with the direction. When a path is misaligned, the opposite tends to occur. The support that should be available withdraws. People who are interested lose interest. Collaborators become unavailable. The path forward requires you to generate every unit of momentum entirely from your own will, without any of the natural resonance that an aligned path tends to attract. The fifth way the pattern appears is through what the traditions call triple warning. This is the appearance of three distinct separate signals communicating the same directional message within a concentrated period of time. The signals do not need to be of the same type. One may be logistical, one may be relational, one may be somatic. What makes them a triple warning is not their form, but their convergence. They are all pointing in the same direction, and they are all arriving within a span of time that makes their relatedness impossible to dismiss honestly. The triple warning is not the beginning of the signal. By the time the triple warning appears, the signal has usually been present in quieter forms for some time. The triple warning is an escalation. It is the pattern becoming loud enough that it can no longer be processed as coincidence. When you have received three separate signals of the same directional message within a short period, the universe has effectively repeated itself 3 times. At that point, the question is no longer whether the signal is real. The question is whether you are willing to read it. The sixth way the pattern appears is through what might be called emotional stagnation around the goal. Early enthusiasm for a goal is a form of forward momentum. Even when the goal is difficult, the early stages carry a quality of genuine desire. When you have been on a wrong path long enough, the emotional relationship to the goal changes. You stop pursuing it from desire and begin pursuing it from something closer to obligation, from the momentum of having started, from the fear of what not pursuing it would mean. When your primary emotional relationship to a goal has shifted from desire to obligation, or from excitement to resignation, that is not simply a sign that the work has become harder. It is a sign that something more fundamental has changed in the alignment between you and the destination. Desire does not simply evaporate from a rightful path during normal difficulty. It may quiet temporarily, but it returns. When the desire itself has gone silent and what remains is only the machinery of continuing, the signal is worth examining with full honesty. The seventh way the pattern appears is through strange silence from the path itself, not the silence of a path that is simply slow, but the silence of a path that has stopped generating feedback altogether. When you reach out and nothing returns, when you invest energy and there is no echo, no response, no movement in the environment. This total silence is different from ordinary slowness. Ordinary slowness still produces some responsiveness. The sealed path produces nothing. It is as though you are speaking into a room that has no walls, no ceiling, and no floor. The silence is not empty. It is a specific communication. The eighth way the pattern appears is through dreams in the body at rest. While waking consciousness can be very effectively managed, manipulated, and overridden by the structures of ego and cultural programming, the sleeping mind and the body at rest have access to a different layer of information. Recurring dreams that produce dread rather than resolution, persistent tension in the body that does not respond to rest, the quality of waking from sleep with immediate anxiety about the very thing you have been forcing. These are signals from a system that is deeper than your conscious override capacity. The pattern, when you begin to look for it, reveals itself not as a single event, but as a constellation of events across time and across channels. Each individual signal might be explained away, but the constellation cannot. The constellation is the language. And the language, once you learn to read it, is surprisingly consistent, surprisingly precise, and surprisingly patient. If you have recognized this pattern in your own life, if you have felt the specific quality of sealed, circular, draining obstruction described in this section, write the word "red door" in the comments. You do not need to explain anything further. The archive will understand. The red door pattern does not only reveal that a path is wrong, it reveals something more intimate and more significant than that. It reveals who you are at the level of belief, identity, and attachment. The obstruction is not just a message about the path, it is a mirror held up to the architecture of your inner world. And if you are willing to look into it honestly, it will show you something you could not have seen any other way. The first thing forced paths reveal is the structure of your attachment. Attachment is not simply caring about something. Attachment is caring about something in a way that makes the loss of it feel like the loss of yourself. When you cannot stop forcing a door, even after the signal has appeared 3 times, even after the body has contracted repeatedly, even after the logistical impossibility has become undeniable, what you are revealing is not strength of character. You are revealing that your sense of self is dependent on the outcome of that specific path. This is important to understand without judgment. Attachment of this depth almost always has a root that is deeper than the current goal. The person who cannot release the wrong relationship is often not attached to that specific person as they truly are, but to what that person represents. The proof of being lovable, the evidence of being chosen, the resolution of an old wound that the relationship promised to heal. When you understand this, the forced path becomes not just a navigation error, but a diagnostic tool. The second thing forced paths reveal is the presence of an identity structure that was built around external conditions. There is a version of identity that is stable regardless of outcome. It does not depend on achieving a particular goal to maintain its coherence. And there is a version of identity that is entirely constructed from external proof. It requires the career to validate intelligence. It requires the relationship to confirm lovability. It requires the business to prove worthiness. When the path that was supposed to generate that external proof begins to close, the person whose identity depends on it experiences the closing not as a redirection, but as an annihilation. And the response to perceived annihilation is not to pause and read the signal. The response is to fight. The red door is not just being forced by ego or pride. It is being forced by a version of the self that genuinely believes that not having this specific outcome means not existing in a form it can recognize. The third thing forced paths reveal is the fear of the empty corridor. Most people have never practiced staying in the space between one thing and the next. The culture they live in provides constant instructions for achieving, advancing, and acquiring, but almost no instruction for inhabiting the in-between. The corridor between the closed red door and the next open one is that in-between space. It is quiet. It is uncertain. It has no clear landmarks. And for a person who has never practiced being in that kind of space, it activates a very ancient fear. The fear of the empty corridor is not really a fear of nothing. It is a fear of the self without context. Who are you if you are not pursuing the career? Who are you if you are not in the relationship? Who are you when the goal that organized your days and gave your ambition a direction has been released? These are not rhetorical questions. They are real questions that require real answers. And the reason most people return to force the red door rather than sit in the corridor is that those questions feel more dangerous than the door. The fourth thing forced paths reveal is a specific relationship to trust. Not trust in a general philosophical sense, but trust in a very particular experiential sense. The trust that if you release this path, something better is actually available. The trust that reality is not punishing you by closing this door, but protecting you. The trust that the empty corridor is not the end of the story, but the middle of it. This trust cannot be produced by reasoning. It can only be cultivated through experience, and the experience of it usually begins with releasing the first wrong path and surviving the corridor. The fifth thing forced paths reveal is the presence of shame as a motivating force. Shame is one of the most powerful and least examined drivers of continued wrong path behavior. It sounds like this inside the mind. If I stop now, people will know I could not do it. If I turn around, I will have to admit I was wrong. If I release this, everyone who watched me begin it will see me as someone who fails. Shame does not present itself as shame in the moment. It presents itself as pride, as reputation, as responsibility to others, as not wanting to let people down. But beneath those presentations, it is shame. When shame is the primary reason you are forcing a door, the door itself becomes less relevant. You are not actually pushing toward the goal anymore. You are running from the feeling of being seen as someone who does not finish things. And the universe, which is not responding to your public image but to your inner frequency, continues to produce obstruction regardless of how many people are watching. The sixth thing forced paths reveal is the depth of your relationship to control. Some people have developed a profound resistance to allowing reality to lead. They have learned, often from early experience, that if they do not control the outcome will be painful. And so they maintain control by pushing, by forcing, by refusing to allow anything to close that they have not decided to close themselves. The red door signal threatens this control structure directly. The signal is saying something the controller cannot accept, that this is not yours to decide alone. What the forced path ultimately reveals beneath all these individual layers is the distance between who you are currently operating as and who you would be if you trusted reality as a guidance system rather than a neutral terrain to be conquered. The person who can read the red door signal, pause at the warm handle, and choose not to force the lock is not a passive person. They are a person who has developed a profound relationship with discernment. They are a person whose identity does not depend on the outcome of one specific door. They are a person who has practiced the corridor and knows that it always leads somewhere. The mirror of forced paths is not cruel. It is precise. It is showing you exactly where your growth is waiting, not on the other side of the red door, but in the understanding of why you were pressing against it in the first place. The teaching of the red door signal carries a responsibility that this codex takes seriously. Not every closed door is a red door. Not every obstacle is a redirection. Not every period of difficulty is a misalignment signal. If you walk away from this teaching with only a vague sense that resistance means stop, you will misapply the protocol, and you will use a powerful discernment tool as a sophisticated justification for avoidance. This is a critical distinction. The red door signal is real. But fear also produces obstruction-like experiences. Trauma creates avoidance patterns that mimic misalignment signals. Laziness generates excuses that sound like intuition. Anxiety projects catastrophic meaning onto ordinary difficulty. And unless you can separate the genuine red door signal from these distortions, the teaching becomes harmful rather than helpful. The first major distortion is fear of the unfamiliar dressed as intuition. When something is new, when it requires skills you do not yet have, when it exposes you to judgment or uncertainty or the possibility of failure, it will produce discomfort. That discomfort often manifests as a felt sense of wrongness, of not belonging on this path, of this not being the right thing. It can feel indistinguishable from the genuine red door signal if you have not developed the capacity to feel the difference. The difference is in the quality of the resistance and in its relationship to your growth edge. Fear of the unfamiliar tends to concentrate around the exposure itself. It is the nervousness before the performance, the anxiety before the conversation, the contraction before the new and demanding thing. Once you move through the exposure, the quality of the resistance changes. The path opens rather than sealing further. This is a critical diagnostic. Does the resistance deepen as you engage, or does it ease? With genuine misalignment, engagement deepens the resistance. The more you invest in the wrong path, the heavier the obstruction becomes. With fear of the unfamiliar, engagement tends to reduce the resistance over time. The path becomes more accessible as you develop familiarity with it. If you are not tracking this dimension of the experience, you will mistake the fear of beginning something genuinely important for the signal to stop. The second major distortion is trauma-patterned avoidance. People who have experienced significant pain in a particular area of life often develop an avoidance pattern that activates whenever they approach a similar territory. The avoidance does not feel like avoidance. It feels like protection. It may feel like discernment, like an inner voice saying, "You have been here before and you know how it ends." But the inner voice of trauma-patterned avoidance is not reading the current path. It is reading a map drawn in the past and projecting it onto a present that may be genuinely different. The relationship opportunity that triggers avoidance because it resembles an old wound may actually be an aligned opportunity. The creative direction that produces contraction, because it resembles a past failure, may actually be the most genuine creative territory you have. The trauma voice is not wrong that something painful happened. It is potentially wrong about what is happening now. This does not mean you should ignore the body's signals when trauma-patterned avoidance is present. It means you should work with those signals with more care and more complexity than a simple stop or continue instruction allows. This is an area where working with a skilled guide, a therapist, a practitioner, or a trusted and discerning elder in your life becomes genuinely valuable. The codex does not replace that kind of support. It adds a layer of pattern literacy to it. The third major distortion is ordinary difficulty dressed as misalignment. Aligned paths are difficult. Real creative work is difficult. Building something genuine in the world is difficult. Deep relationships require sustained effort and honest navigation of conflict. These difficulties are not red door signals. They are the texture of doing something real. A person who mistakes ordinary difficulty for misalignment will abandon every worthwhile thing they begin precisely at the point where the work becomes demanding enough to actually produce something. The diagnostic here is simple, but requires honest application. Is the difficulty producing movement, even slow movement? Is there genuine growth occurring even when the path is hard? Is the resistance around specific aspects of the work rather than around the work's fundamental direction? If the answer to these questions is yes, you are likely in the territory of ordinary correct difficulty. The red door pattern is characterized by the absence of forward movement, despite sustained effort, not by the presence of effort itself. The fourth major distortion is one-signal interpretation. A person who has recently encountered this teaching sometimes makes the mistake of reading a single obstacle, a single delay, a single inconvenient piece of feedback as a definitive red door signal and using it to justify abandoning a path they are actually meant to be on. The red door signal, as this codex has described, is characterized by accumulation, by repetition, by the appearance of the same directional message across multiple channels and over time. One bad meeting is not a red door. One rejected application is not a red door. One difficult conversation that ends poorly is not a red door. These are individual events within a life that contains both aligned and misaligned paths. Learning to read them requires the patience to observe the pattern across multiple events, not the impulse to extract cosmic certainty from a single data point. The fifth distortion is spiritual bypassing disguised as discernment. This occurs when someone uses the red door framework to avoid the necessary discomfort of genuine growth. It sounds like receiving a sign that now is not the time, when the truth is that the time is precisely now, and the avoidance is about fear rather than misalignment. It sounds like the universe is protecting me by closing this door, when the door is not being closed by the universe, but by the person themselves who will not turn the handle. The honest marker of spiritual bypassing in this context is the presence of relief rather than loss when the decision to stop is made. When you correctly identify a red door signal and choose to release the wrong path, there is often a complex emotional experience. There is grief because something real was invested. There is uncertainty because the next door is not yet visible. There is some relief, but it is entangled with loss. When there is only relief, when the decision to stop feels light and easy and immediately comfortable, it is worth asking honestly whether you have read a genuine signal or whether you have simply used the language of discernment to do something you wanted to do anyway. The The capacity to separate genuine red door signals from their distortions is not developed in a single reading. It is cultivated over time, through practice, through honest self-observation, through the willingness to be wrong in both directions, to have pushed through when you should have stopped, and to have stopped when you should have pushed. Each experience refines the instrument. Each honest moment of reading your own experience adds another layer of calibration to your capacity for discernment. That calibration is the real goal of this codex. Not a formula that tells you when to stop and when to continue, but the development of a relationship with your own inner instrument that is precise enough, honest enough, and practiced enough to read the difference. The Red Door Protocol is not a decision-making checklist. It is a discernment sequence. It is a series of moves that you make with attention, body, and honest inquiry when you notice that you may be standing before a door that is red. It requires time, stillness, and a degree of honesty that is uncomfortable but not impossible. And it begins not with action, but with the suspension of action. The first move of the protocol is called the full pause. When you notice the signature of wrong path friction, the circular obstruction, the draining repetition, the body contraction, the strange silence. The first instruction is to stop pushing entirely for a defined period of time. Not forever. Not as surrender. For a defined period. 7 days is a meaningful minimum for most decisions. 30 days is appropriate for major life directions. During the pause, you do not push the door. You do not strategize new approaches to the same door. You simply stop and you observe what happens in the system when your force is withdrawn. This first move is already difficult for most people because it feels like giving up. It is not. It is gathering information. When you stop pushing, the environment gives you information it cannot give you while you are in motion. The quality of the silence that follows the pause is itself diagnostic. If the pause produces immediate and genuine relief, that relief is information. If the pause produces a grief that feels like something real ending, that grief is also information. If the pause produces anxiety about what others will think, that anxiety is pointing to the structures this codex described in the diagnostic mirror section. The second move of the protocol is to document the specific obstruction, not in a general emotional way, but with precision. Write down the exact form the obstruction has taken, the specific door that will not open, the specific resources that are not arriving, the specific relationships that are withdrawing, the specific body sensations that accompany the pursuit of this path. Documentation transforms a vague feeling of things not working into a mappable pattern, and patterns can be read in ways that vague feelings cannot. When you look at your documentation, you are looking for repetition. You are looking for whether the same category of obstruction has appeared more than twice. You are looking for whether the obstruction is concentrated around one specific goal or distributed randomly across your life. You are looking for the presence of the three-channel pattern: logistical signals, relational signals, and somatic signals, all pointing in the same direction simultaneously. The third move of the protocol is to conduct a body consultation. Separate from your mental analysis of the situation, find a quiet moment and bring your full attention to your physical body. Call to mind the specific path you are examining. Hold the image or feeling of that path clearly in your awareness, and then observe, with precision, what the body does in response. Do not interpret immediately. Simply observe. Does the chest expand or contract? Does the stomach lift or drop? Does the breath open or tighten? Does the body lean forward into the image or subtly withdraw from it? The body's response to a genuine misalignment signal is not subtle once you learn to read it. It is specific, consistent, and repeatable. If you call to mind the path and the body contracts on 3 separate attempts across 3 separate days, you have a consistent body signal. A single body response is insufficient data. 3 consistent responses constitute a pattern that deserves serious weight in your discernment process. The 4th move of the protocol is to ask the question beneath the goal. This is one of the most important moves in the entire sequence. The question is, what am I actually seeking through this specific path? Not what the path is supposed to provide on the surface level, but what it is promising at the deepest level of belief and desire. If you are pursuing the career, what does the career represent at the deepest level? Safety? Proof of worthiness? The resolution of a childhood wound around recognition? If you are pursuing the relationship, what does the relationship represent? Evidence that you are lovable, the feeling of not being alone, the completion of an identity that feels incomplete without it. When you identify what you are actually seeking, you can then ask a second question. Is this specific path the only way to receive it? Or is it the path you attach to first because of external circumstances, cultural modeling, or the accident of early exposure? This second question often reveals that the actual desire is real and valid, but the specific door through which you have been trying to access it is wrong. The desire for safety is real, but safety does not live exclusively behind one particular career door. The desire for love is real, but love does not live exclusively behind one particular person or relationship structure. The 5th move of the protocol is to stop forcing for the full defined period without substituting a different strategy for the same door. This is a refinement of the pause. Many people pause physically but continue to force mentally. They stop taking external action but spend every quiet moment strategizing new approaches to the same path. They research ways to reframe the pitch, different angles of entry, different timing, different presentations of the same closed door. This mental forcing is not a pause, it is pushing with a different limb. The true pause requires the withdrawal of both external action and internal strategizing around the same specific door. What you may do during the pause is attend to other areas of your life with genuine presence, not as a distraction from the thing you are pausing, but as a genuine return to the breadth of your existence. This is where the corridor becomes meaningful. In the corridor, you are not pushing toward anything. You are observing. You are present. And in that presence, information arrives that the noise of forcing was masking. The 6th move of the protocol is to request a confirmation. This is a direct internal act of communication with the intelligence that operates through reality's feedback system. It is not a demand. It is a genuine inquiry. You are asking, if this path is genuinely wrong for me, show me in a way I cannot dismiss. And if this path is genuinely mine, and the obstruction is a test of real challenge rather than a signal of misalignment, show me that as well. The request must be made with genuine openness to either answer. If you make the request while already knowing which answer you are hoping for and filtering the incoming information through that preference, the request is not a genuine inquiry. It is a form of manipulation of your own discernment process. True inquiry means you are willing to receive the confirmation that the path is wrong, even if that confirmation is painful. The seventh move of the protocol is to observe what opens naturally during the pause. This is one of the most eloquent moves in the entire sequence. During the period when you have stopped forcing the red door, pay attention to what appears without effort. What opportunities arrive unsolicited? What conversations happen that carry unusual clarity? What directions begin to generate a quality of resonance that the forced path never produced? What ideas surface from the quiet that the noise of pushing was suppressing? The naturally opening elements during the pause are often the actual path. They are not always dramatic. They rarely arrive with fanfare, but they carry a quality that is recognizable once you know what you are looking for. They feel lighter. They feel alive in a way that the red door never quite did. They feel like something is meeting you rather than you forcing something to move. The eighth move of the protocol is to distinguish between the end of this door and the end of this desire. The closing of a specific path does not mean the closing of the deeper desire that the path was meant to fulfill. If your genuine desire is to build something meaningful in the world, the failure of one specific business plan is not the end of that desire. It is the end of one specific expression of it. The desire itself is still valid, still real, still part of your legitimate trajectory. Making this distinction is essential because many people, when a door closes, interpret it as a verdict on their worthiness to want the thing at all. They experience the closing not as a rerouting, but as a denial. And from that place of perceived denial, they either force the closed door even harder or they abandon the desire entirely, both of which are misreadings. The rerouting is not rejection, it is precision navigation. The ninth move of the protocol is to allow a period of intentional non-decision. After the pause, after the body consultation, after the question beneath the goal has been examined, after the confirmation has been requested, there is a period in which the most powerful thing you can do is nothing deliberate regarding the major decision. You are allowing the information you have gathered to settle. You are allowing the system to continue communicating without interference. You are developing trust in the timing of the answer rather than forcing the timing of the decision. This period of intentional non-decision is not indefinite. It has a natural end, which is usually signaled by the arrival of a clarity that is qualitatively different from the conclusions you can reach through analysis alone. That clarity does not feel like a decision. It feels like a recognition. It feels like something that was already true becoming visible. The 10th and final move of the protocol is the act of redirection without shame. When the signal has been confirmed, when the body has been consulted, when the pattern has been documented, when what opens naturally has been observed, and when the recognition has arrived, the final act is to redirect your energy toward what is opening, rather than continuing to manage the closure of what was wrong. This redirection must be done without shame, without the story that you failed, without the performance of regret for the benefit of those who were watching. Redirecting from a wrong path after reading the signal correctly is not failure. It is one of the most intelligent things a navigator can do. The traveler who turns away from the red door and walks toward the corridor is not retreating. They are beginning to move for the first time in a direction that is actually real. The red door protocol is a powerful instrument, but powerful instruments, like all tools, can be misused. The misuse of this protocol does not announce itself. It disguises itself as wisdom, as discernment, as spiritual maturity. It is worth naming the most common distortions clearly, because the clearer you can see them, the less vulnerable you are to them. The first mistake is demanding instant certainty before making any move. The protocol requires patience because the signal requires time to read correctly. But some people interpret the pause as a period during which they should receive a definitive, unmistakable, undeniable confirmation before they will accept any conclusion. They wait for a sign so clear that no part of them can question it. And because clarity at that level rarely arrives in the form the ego expects, they remain paralyzed indefinitely. Clarity in the metaphysical sense is rarely a thunderclap. It is usually a quiet accumulation of consistent information that eventually reaches the threshold of undeniability. If you are waiting for certainty so absolute that it eliminates all uncertainty, you are not practicing discernment. You are practicing a different kind of control, the refusal to act on genuine, sufficient information, because insufficient certainty gives you a reason to remain exactly where you are. The second mistake is treating a single inconvenience as a red door signal. This is the overcorrection of someone who has just encountered this teaching for the first time and is now determined to read everything. One delayed email is not a signal. One appointment that does not come together is not a pattern. One difficult conversation is not the universe redirecting your trajectory. The red door signal, as this codex has repeated, is characterized by accumulation, by repetition across multiple channels, and by the persistence of the pattern over time. Using a single obstacle as justification for abandoning something real is not spiritual discernment. It is impulsivity wearing the language of alignment. And if you build a habit of reading single events as cosmic verdicts, you will eventually become a person who cannot complete anything, because every path has moments of single event friction that are simply the normal texture of engaged life. The third mistake is using this protocol to avoid taking genuine responsibility for circumstances that you have actually created through your own behavior, preparation, or choices. If a business is failing because you did not develop the necessary skills, the failure is not a red door signal. It is feedback about the work that still needs to be done. If a relationship is struggling because you have been emotionally unavailable, the struggle is not a misalignment signal, it is a response to your behavior. The red door protocol is not a framework for outsourcing responsibility to the universe. It requires you to first honestly account for what is within your own domain of influence. If the obstruction is a response to correctable behavior or insufficient preparation, the correct response is correction and preparation, not the interpretation that this path is sealed. The protocol works correctly only when it is applied to situations where you have genuinely done what is yours to do, and the obstruction persists regardless. The fourth mistake is forcing a new door immediately after the first one closes. When someone correctly identifies and releases a wrong path, there is often an urgent impulse to immediately attach to a new direction. This urgency is understandable. The corridor is uncomfortable. The in-between feels like loss of identity, loss of direction, loss of momentum. But replacing one forced door with another, driven by the urgency to escape the corridor rather than by genuine resonance with the new path, is simply repeating the pattern in a different location. The new path chosen from urgency carries the same misaligned energy that created the obstruction in the first place. The corridor must be inhabited for long enough to allow a genuine recalibration. The length of that recalibration is not fixed. It is determined by the depth of the investment in the wrong path and the degree of identity restructuring required. But it cannot be skipped by immediately attaching to the next available direction. The fifth mistake is confusing the withdrawal of a support structure with the closing of an aligned path. Sometimes an aligned path loses a key person, a key resource, or a key circumstance that it depended on. This loss is not necessarily a red door signal. It may be a signal that the path must continue without that particular support, that a different form of support is being offered, or that a reconfiguration of the approach is needed rather than an abandonment of the direction itself. Not every loss along an aligned path is a rerouting signal. Sometimes the path requires that you learn to move forward without the scaffolding that felt essential. The distinction requires the full application of the protocol rather than a quick interpretation of a single loss as a verdict on the entire direction. The sixth mistake is performing the protocol publicly in ways that turn a private discernment process into a social narrative. The Red Door Protocol is an inner practice. It is between you and the intelligence operating through reality's feedback system. When people announce publicly that they are practicing the protocol, share their signs on social media, or use the language of the teaching as content for external validation, they introduce social performance into a process that requires private honesty. The moment you begin managing how your discernment process looks to others, you have compromised the accuracy of the instrument. The protocol requires a quality of private honesty that is difficult to maintain when the process has an audience. Keep it internal. Keep it sacred. Let the results speak when they eventually manifest, not the process while it is underway. The seventh mistake is forgetting that the protocol resolves through action, not contemplation alone. Some people fall in love with the pause, with the inquiry, with the symbolic interpretation of events, and never arrive at the point of clear action in a new direction. The protocol has a conclusion. It ends with redirection. It ends with moving toward what is opening. The contemplation is valuable only in service of that eventual movement. If you have been in the pause for a very long time, without any movement in a genuine direction, the pause itself may have become a new form of avoidance. Once you have practiced the Red Door Protocol through smaller decisions and simpler redirections, it becomes available for application to the highest stakes areas of your life. This is where the teaching moves from a discernment tool into something closer to a navigation system for the whole of existence. And it is in these deeper areas that the protocol reveals its fullest power and its fullest demand. In relationships, the advanced application of the Red Door Protocol requires the willingness to distinguish between the normal difficulty of genuine intimacy and the sealed obstruction of fundamental misalignment. Every real relationship will go through periods that feel obstructed. Conflict is not a red door signal. Necessary growth and the discomfort it produces are not red door signals. But when a relationship consistently produces the specific pattern, circular obstruction, draining repetition, body contraction around the continued presence of the connection, and the triple warning across logistical, relational, and somatic channels simultaneously, the protocol must be applied with full honesty and without the protection of romantic narrative. The advanced application in relationships also requires recognizing what the pattern reveals about you, as the diagnostic mirror section described. When you can hold both simultaneously, the genuine signal that the path is wrong and the honest inquiry into what your attachment to it reveals about your inner structure, you gain something extraordinary. You gain the capacity to redirect without repeating the pattern immediately with someone new, because you have used the closure not just as an ending, but as a diagnostic opportunity. In the domain of money and financial decisions, the advanced application reveals itself in the quality of aligned versus misaligned financial opportunities. When an opportunity is aligned, the path toward it tends to generate a specific quality of natural support. The necessary conversations happen with unusual ease. The resources appear through channels that feel almost collaborative rather than forced. The information needed arrives before you have to work too hard to find it. Misaligned financial opportunities produce a different texture. They require constant and escalating effort just to keep them alive. The parties who should be enthusiastic are mysteriously hesitant. The numbers that should work keep finding new ways not to. The logistical foundation keeps shifting. These are not signs of a difficult but worthwhile investment. These are signs of a path that reality is not supporting at the level where it matters most. In the domain of creative work, the advanced application becomes a relationship with your own genuine creative voice, rather than the voice that was shaped by what you thought would be accepted or successful. Wrong creative paths often feel urgent, visible, and externally validated in their early stages, precisely because they are constructed to appeal to an imagined audience rather than emerging from authentic creative necessity. But over time, the forced creative path produces a specific exhaustion and a specific emptiness that the genuine creative path does not. When you apply the Red Door Protocol to creative work at this level, you are asking not just whether this specific project is aligned, but whether the creative direction you have been pursuing reflects your actual voice or a constructed version of it. This is a deeper and more demanding inquiry, but it is the one that produces work of lasting genuine resonance, rather than work that is technically correct but somehow hollow at its center. In the domain of spiritual timing, the advanced application is perhaps the most nuanced and the most important. There are invitations that arrive in life that appear to be doors, but are actually tests of readiness, of discernment, of the capacity to wait without forcing. These are not red doors in the sense of paths that are wrong forever. They are doors that are not yet the right time. The advanced practitioner of this protocol learns to feel the difference between the sealed quality of a permanently wrong path and the specific quality of a ripening door, one that will open when the timing and the inner state are both in alignment. The mastery of this teaching does not produce a person who never encounters obstruction again. Obstruction continues to be a feature of life because life continues to require navigation. What changes at the level of mastery is the speed and accuracy of the reading. The master practitioner does not spend years forcing a sealed door before finally hearing the signal. They feel the texture of the handle in the first moments of contact. They read the direction of the candle flame. They make their assessment with the full body, not just the rational mind, and they act on that assessment with a calm that is unmistakably different from both the panic of forced pursuit and the passivity of avoidance. That calm is not indifference. It is the calm of a navigator who trusts the instruments. It is the calm of someone who has been in the corridor before and knows that it always leads somewhere. It is the calm of a person who no longer needs the destination to be certain before they begin moving toward it, because they have learned through practice that the movement itself is what makes the destination become real. Return now to the traveler in the corridor. Return to the door that glows red. return to the handle warm beneath his palm, to the candle flame bending away, to the silence so specific and so weighted that it has a form. He did not force the lock. In the version of this story that ends differently, he stood for a long time in the corridor with his hand on the handle, long enough to feel the heat not as proof of his proximity to the destination, but as a message from something wiser than his determination. Long enough to notice the silence not as opposition, but as counsel. Long enough to take his hand from the handle, and in doing so, to take the most important step of his entire journey. He turned around. Not because he was weak, not because he had given up on what he was seeking, but because in the act of releasing the wrong door, the corridor changed around him. The silence that had felt like an ending became something else entirely. It became the specific quality of a threshold before an opening, and ahead of him, not immediately, not dramatically, but with a gradual, undeniable clarity of something that was always there, waiting for him to stop facing the wrong direction, he saw another door. This door had no heat in the handle. The candle beside it burned straight. And when he placed his palm against the surface, without gripping, without forcing, without the desperate calculation of someone who had already invested too much to turn back, the door opened before he applied any pressure at all. It opened because he arrived without force. It opened because the path on the other side was his, and the system that governs aligned paths had been waiting with extraordinary patience for him to stop pressing against the sealed one. What he found on the other side was not the destination he had originally named. It was something more accurate than that. It was the fulfillment of the actual desire beneath the named destination, the desire that the wrong door had promised but could never have delivered, because delivering it was not the function of that door. The right door opened directly into what was real. You have been that traveler. Perhaps you still are. Perhaps the hand that holds this codex has also held a warm handle in a windowless corridor and felt every instinct communicate stop, while every psychological structure built for your survival communicated push. That recognition is not shame. It is the beginning of literacy. And literacy, in the language of obstruction as protection, is the most navigational gift you can carry. If this codex arrived at the right moment, if something in these pages named what you have been experiencing in a language that made the experience finally legible, then keep it close. Return to it when the signals become difficult to read. Return to it when you find your hand on a warm handle and you are not yet certain whether what you are feeling is the friction of rightful challenge or the heat of a sealed door. The archive will remain here. The library does not close, and the record of these patterns will wait for you patiently for as long as navigation requires.